I've never really used React, and it's my expectation that I won't like it very much. Now, I'm not saying that to be negative, but it's rather that I haven't heard all that many good things about it, combined with the fact that I don't really like the modern JavaScript ecosystem all that much. So both of those sort of weigh against it. I'm sure it's very capable of doing its job. I assume it's a capable tool, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I will like it very much. However, I will give it a proper try. I'm curious about it. It is the dominant framework out there for front-end web development, and a framework is perhaps a strong word. From what I hear, it's more of a library. I will give it a proper try. It is the dominant framework after all, and I really like trying new things, so I actually look forward to trying it out. I'm Lars Wikman, and this is Untitled. For some context, my experience with React is that I've tried it probably once around 8 years ago when Redux was all the rage, and I was curious about the whole time traveling debugger sort of event sourcing the front end thing, and I never really took it anywhere. Since then, I've used a number of different frameworks. So I have done a ton of AngularJS back in the day, the original one that is, and then I've played around with Vue.js in an application I made. It was fine, and I've used Alpine.js some more recently, and I've done a ton of Elm most recently. Now, with all this, I don't have a favorite JavaScript framework. I don't have a preferred one, really. So I guess if React makes a really good impression, it has a shot. The idea is to take the approach that I take with learning anything, which is get started as quickly as possible. So I hit the docs, I find a getting started or a quick start or a tutorial type guide that I can follow and drastically diverge from every now and then. And I follow any docs I need along the way. So we'll see how that works out. Just a brief aside, if you're an Elixir developer or you aspire to be one, hang around until the end of the video. I'll have some good jobs with some great companies to share there. Now, time for some React. This is reactjs.org. This is what you get if you search for React.js on Google. And this is apparently what I'm going to be using to get going. My impulse right now is to go for this Get Started button here. I see that it says take the tutorial as well, which is perhaps more up my alley, but let's start with Get Started. We'll see. Try React, learn React, staying informed, version documentation, something missing. Create a new React app. Simple HTML page with script tags might still be the best option. It only takes a minute to set up. Okay, so I'm fine with trying that as a first step. So make your React. Add React in 1 minute. So, assuming I'm gonna need a web page. Almost everything is optional in HTML, but let's add some of the typical structure. Anyway. Okay, so what do they want me to do? They want me to add a like button container. Let's try that. And they want me to import React development.js, React DOM development.js, then load our component. So we shove these in here, and then we need to add our own script for our component. So let's do what they did. Take on the JS. Let's see. we open a new file called likebutton.js. Open this starter code and paste it in the file you created. If you say so. After the starter code, add 2 lines to the bottom. I'll just minimize this a little bit, give us some more space. So we're creating a React element called E, I think. We have a class LikeButton extends React component, has a constructor, super props, the state liked false. It has a render function or method. If this state.liked, return you like this. Return E button on click. This set state liked true. Like. Okay. We grab the container from the DOM. We say react DOM.render our E, an element, I guess, called LikeButton. Oh yeah, this, I guess, just grabs the function React create element, calls it E. And we render that to our DOM container. That's it, no step 4. Targeted container is not a DOM element. Yeah, I think that wants to be before. Imagine that's the, no. There we go. And I clicked it and then it says you like this. All right, fair enough so far as a demo. Now I have the distinct sense that this is not typically how you use React. I know that there's this thing called JSX, and I know that this is not typically how you define your components. So let's go back, see what's next. Tip, reuse a component, minify JavaScript for production. Optional, try React with JSX. So I did skim this getting started guide and I saw that they cover this. And it's definitely more in line with what I would expect us to use. JSX is completely optional. Many people find it helpful. All right. In my understanding, it's pretty necessary, or at least it's something that I don't think I've heard many people talk about using React without JSX, but I don't follow the React field very closely. So this would be rather than this, we should be able to do this, is my understanding. Unexpected token. Right. This type text babel. I saw that when I skimmed previously. I would not have necessarily caught that if I hadn't. Access to blah, 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 blah. Are you kidding me? Do I need to do course and stuff? Okay, I think we've reached the point where it makes sense to actually go to the tutorial or see at least if we can start a proper React app, because I think we'll run into a bunch of weirdness that has very little to do with React development and very much to do with sort of minimal getting started things. So let's see. Ooh, create a new React app. You might not need a toolchain. If you're learning React or creating a new single page app, use create React app. All right, I'll just yeet these. That's how you say it these days, right? You yeet things. npx create React app under React. Very cool name. I'm just gonna pull down the world. Oh, it was a pretty small world. Then. Create React app requires node 14 or higher. Okay, ASDF list. Oh, ASDF list Node.js. List all Node.js. Requires 14 or higher. I imagine it works with the latest though. This is why programming is difficult. It's not the programming itself. Very, very complicated sometimes to get anything done. So I'm just gonna make a subdirectory here and go ASDF local Node.js. So ASDF is something I use to handle multiple versions of different languages and stuff. It's very nice. So now, well, I don't know what the npx version is, but with a little bit of luck, we're doing this under a correct Node version. We're definitely installing a lot of packages. So it tells us about a few different commands we have. npm start, npm run build, npm test, npm run eject. So I'm gonna, with this thing, run the development server. Give it a bit more space. So what has this gotten us? App.js. Header, class name. We can edit it and save to reload. So we could open this, say it takes the tutorial, inspecting the starter code, passing data through props, making it an interactive component. Oh. So, local development environment. What is React? A few different kinds of components, but we'll start with React component subclasses. A component takes in parameters called props, short for properties, and returns a hierarchy of views displayed via the render method. The render method returns a description of what you want to see on the screen. React takes the description and displays the results. Yeah. So class board extends React component, render square, return square. Hold on, what are they saying here? So there's the button, and that has a class. Oh no, they're doing this to do the render square. Yeah, right. I think the approach I'll take here is we'll edit the heck out of this one. So class name app link. What is this class name thing? Why would I just not pass class? That seems weird to me, but okay. So we can start by just removing that sort of hello worldy text there. Now we just have the React. We can remove that. And I don't need a header. Okay, so do we have anything else? No, we don't have any other components or anything. I don't think, not from what I'm seeing. So function app return. This, I've heard that there's these function-based components in React, and this all seems to be about classes. What I end up wondering is, can I just define a new one here? So I'm being very sloppy now, and I'm not carefully reading what they're telling me to do, which is pretty much par for the course for how I tackle tutorials sometimes. Inspecting the starter code, yada yada yada, class board, class square. All right, so typically I guess you would implement these in different files and different modules. That doesn't seem super necessary in our case. So let's try to do some things in a single one. So I have an idea about what I want to try to do. I want to be able to show, let's call them article titles as a first thing. We can see where we go from there, but let's call them an article, and that extends React component. And I'll just define a render method on it. Guess I haven't imported React. Maybe that's important. Let's see. Square extends to React, da 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 da. So I should be able to just do div, blah, div. Like right now it's fiery red and angry. Can I do that? Is it something like that? I never remember. Your render method should have a return statement. Fair enough, I guess. We'll look at the code they did. Oh yeah, so. Import React from React. Article is defined but never used. That's fine. So we should be able to put article in here, I think. Blah. Perfect. Nailed it. Everything's fantastic. So what were they saying about props and stuff? They say square value I, and then that grabs the props value. Okay. So if I have a bunch of articles, I could do heading equals foo, heading equals bar. I could go like, ooh, that class name, because that's what we call it, is article. And then H2, I guess, is good. Shouldn't have more than one H1. It's my understanding, and if I find it a little bit odd, honestly. Now, we're always printing blah so far, but we could do, what was the syntax? This, the props dot heading. And now we have those. All right. So if I want to make an interactive lifting state up, so actually this is a good time to look at a little bit closer what we want to do. So I'm going to try the Hacker News API, which is a fun little API because it's a little bit annoying. And it also has some fun data. So new top and best top stories. So if we want to get ourselves some top stories, I mean, we could just do just the fetch API. I know I so rarely use this fetch API. Is it just fetch? Well, let's try it. The amount of normal JavaScript I do is very low these days using the fetch API. I guess this would have an example. Then response, then data. Okay. Let's try that and see if it does what we expect it to. Yeah, it gives us an array of the first 500 posts on Hacker News, but it only gives us the numbers. I'll just take this here. Now the question becomes, what am I supposed to do with it? So I bet I'm gonna hold it wrong. I bet this is not what you're supposed to do. But let's see how we can, in React, do multiple things. Passing data through props, is that? Let's look at this starter code they recommend. Oh, yeah, that one manually renders a number of squares, which I don't find very compelling. Function components. React for loop. Loop inside React ESX. This all seems wild. Why? I mean, there has to be a for syntax in it, right? Did I miss something? Huh. Elements.map. In most component libraries and component frameworks I've worked with, there has been a way to, I want to do this multiple times. So like I want to print out a list of components. I would have expected to find that very quickly in this description. Main concepts, lists and keys. Basic list component, number list numbers. So you don't write it declaratively. I'm super surprised. Actually, legitimately confused. So in Vue, I believe there was definitely a way to do this. So let's see the guide maybe. That's a button. But if I want to print out a yes, list component. List rendering. V4 key. Okay. JSX 4. Because this is such a common thing, so I'd be shocked if there wasn't a sort of standard way to do it. Just looking for a for loop, that's all I'm looking for. All right, I will, since I can't seem to just stumble upon it, I will assume that that's not the way, and I will map this so I can do some of what people were doing. Let's see. So I guess I could do this, essentially. So this would give me an ID. I want that to be an article, and I want it to have the ID. Do I put curlies on that then? Conditional rendering. Yeah, let's go back to tutorial. Passing data through props. Yeah, that seems right. Oh no, none of those. And that's the same as surface. Move that. Add that. Unexpected token. So, yeah, map, components, list and keys, come on. Numbers, map, number, li. So, do essentially exactly what they're doing. Oh, my bad. I'm trying to do this inside the wrong thing, which would probably not work. Reasonably so. No, I don't know. Terminated JSX contexts. This props ID 26. Is this an unterminated context? Oh, I guess there. Okay. Articles is assigned a value but never used. Can I then do articles? And let's see, that should get us. Woo! Fetch then map is not a function. Then map. Well. So this is not a function and then it works. I guess. The above error occurred in the app component. Uncaught type error, blah, 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 fetch, then map is not a function. And then it works anyway. So if I just, outside of here, create that piece of data, and then I say, Should that be here or should that be inside the render? Not quite sure. Okay, so this is doing a function component, I'm guessing. All right, I think I like the look of that. So let's try to turn it into a functional component, which might actually be smoother. Let's do article props. Don't know why it wants me to do a const of them, but I'm a bit concerned that that might actually be necessary. So this let's start with that, and I guess here let's call them IDs. Let's do article. Let's see. So to be quite clear, this is probably not the best way of approaching learning React. It's just how I typically end up doing things. IDs.map is not a function. Oh, wait. Am I forgetting a JavaScript thing? Numbers.map. Maybe the return value isn't a proper array or something. No, right. This is evented stuff. So this isn't actually assigned, which is all correct. So how am I supposed to deal with events in React? It's supposed to react to things. So I think it's a fair question. Let's see if the docs want to tell me something about it. Yes, I ruined my IDs. That's fine. Lifting state up, I don't want to implement time travel right now. I mostly want to sort of handle events. There we go. State and lifecycle. We can just take a look at this. Okay, so classes can have local state. I'm not sure I want to get into that. Handling events. Not those events. So if we set the components up with a constructor, they would be able to start asking for data and triggering state and that kind of thing. So let's see, state and lifecycle. I'm skimming brutally because I have very little patience, but I guess this would be the approach. So I could so I think this is a component. So in that case, I can do extends react.component. I'm curious to see the amount of face palming from people who spent tons of time doing React. I have to see my sort of flailing about, poking at it. I don't mind. I don't mind being silly and stupid for a bit. So I want to set that this state has IDs and that's an empty array, because then I want to do this. And now I'm probably going to do a crime. I don't know, because I haven't honestly stumbled across how React thinks I should be doing this. So I'm just going to say this state.ids. That's that. And then I guess when I get that data, that's the moment I would tell it what components to render. So honestly, I probably don't need to save those IDs, but I think I will anyway. Unexpected token 22. All right, there. They did not expect that token now. Oh, I need curly brackets, I guess. There's so much fancy new syntax in JavaScript, and I know very little of it. Declaration or statement expected. So this is now our render method. Yes. I think I did it. I think I made it do a thing, but it doesn't do the thing. So, React fetch. Using the fetch API. No, what React? How to fetch data in React. Cheat sheet and examples. Export default function app. Use effect. No. Oh. So let's use effect. I think I've heard of this, using the effect hook. Okay, but I've written a class, so can I just... Can the class fetch some data? What? Am I doing something rude? State and lifecycle. I bet I'm not reading this properly, or I'm barely reading it at all, to be quite fair. Adding the local state to a class. So this is essentially what I'm trying to do, but I am waiting for sort of events to kick off and render. So let's just ensure that we hit this. Yeah, we do. I don't know that we're triggering sort of the re-rendering, but I don't know if we should have to. Component did mount, component will unmount. This.setState. What's that? I guess that would be helpful. This. Oh, which this are we in? Try this set state. Articles. Let's ignore IDs. I don't need that to exist. Okay. This mostly makes sense. Can't call set state on a component that is not yet mounted. This is a no-op. Okay, so even more lifecycle related stuff. Component did mount. So I think I need this one because I want to trigger stuff. So let's do that here. Each child in a list should have a unique key prop. Okay, if you think so. That's easy enough to do. All right, now, because I want to do this in the not super elegant way, so either we make more calls to the Hacker News API to get those headings, which is actually what I want to render, or so either we do these here, where we just got the data, or we let each component do it, but then each component has to own that state, and I don't think many people would recommend that. So this means getting some additional calls done. So let's get the story itself. That's this plus JSON. We do a fetch. Did I mention this is a fun API? It's not the most efficient way of doing things, but it's quite fun. So let's map across these IDs and do a ton of stuff. This A for article, which is obvious and not at all sloppiness on my part. So can remove that one. So now we can still use that for the key. We can still pass that ID, but now we can just as well call a.title to pass that on. I wonder, can we just do a thing where we say, yeah, and send the rest of this data in there? Can we do that? I don't know if we can. Have I forgotten some syntax somewhere? I'm shocked. Yeah, there. Well, you can have a return value, but I don't want to give one necessarily. Don't really care, but okay. Now we should be able to do this props heading, I think. Whoa, no. Didn't like that at all. This props. Oh, it's not a class-based one. I'm doing a very poor job right now. This is not how you do it, but it's funny, at least. I'm being a little bit rude to the API, though. So this is where it can get funny to deal with these types of things. I bet these requests also return the ID, which should make it easy enough to set state and not necessarily do a data map on each of them. So if we change what articles is supposed to be, well, it's supposed to be that, but I would love to not have an intermediate data structure, and I think I could make a list of all these promises and then resolve them. But that's going to be a bit of a pain in the neck. I wonder what the easiest way to set this is. Well, we could do const article equals, well, const articles equals this state articles. Actually, so I would want to update the articles with a key. And I don't know what I can and can't do with set state. API reference, React component. Okay, so I could pass so I could make that a function that updates all of this. Not gonna lie, this is being a pain in the neck, and that's partially because I'm just flailing around using fetch. I wouldn't necessarily hold that against React, but at the same time, I'm not thrilled with what I'm seeing of possibilities for doing what I wanted to do. Just the fact that I need to build a list of these articles myself to be able to render that out is a little bit annoying. Oh, okay. MDN promise. Let's see. I don't remember the built-in promises API, but then handle resolve, handle reacted, all. So we map through the IDs. This should let us get a list of promises, which we then which means we can hopefully remove a ton of this boilerplate. We'll see. And then we should be able to do promise at all promises. Then so let's call these items. Actually, I love to at least parse the JSON as well, which should be fine, because it just turns it into another promise. So r.json, like this. Then I should have all the items. If I have all the items, I can do this dot set state articles items.map a curly there's a curly, there's a parenthesis, no. So this is confusing. curly, parentheses, parentheses, curly, parentheses, curly, parentheses, and then we have this curly, and then I guess we probably want a parentheses, right? Probably a parentheses or something. Nope, we want a curly. ID is not defined, 27. Yeah, so that's a.id. a.id. Let's see. Did we get it? Did we make a better one? Bunch of pending requests. Maybe I've been banned. No, they're happening, and we're waiting for all of them. Boom! We've rebuilt the Hacker News front page in React. Sort of. I like this call graph. That's fantastic. All right. So far, with the little I've played around, I haven't touched routing, I haven't touched much state management. I mean, it makes sense to me. I'm not convinced that it's a way I would want to work necessarily. I could see some good parts, I could see some bad parts. I think this whole distinction between class-based components and function-based components has a lot of historical baggage. I'm guessing partially, but I've also heard people talk about function-based components and class-based components a ton. And top of mind, I like the function-based ones more, but I would have to look closer at use effect to figure out if it's something that can do everything I want them to do. And I'm also a little bit deep into, functional programming day to day, so that's more comfortable to me overall. I wouldn't say I have a conclusive view on React from this experiment. It's been a wild bash of exploring, but I think it will give me a decent start if I ever need to tackle a project that includes React in the near future. I'd be curious to hear what you all think about React if you have experience with it and what your experience is versus something like, for example, Elm. I've done a ton of Elm recently. I'm not a huge proponent of Elm, but it definitely has a certain clarity about it once you get over the big hurdle. I've written a blog post about it, my experiences with Elm, so you can check that out if you're curious. Typically, I would still much prefer to work with something like LiveView, which reduces a lot of the complexity needed to communicate between the server and the client for doing this type of front-end rendering. I made videos and blog posts about that as well, so take a look if you're curious about what I would probably choose. I think that's it for React, at least for this time. Let me know if there's anything else you would like to see my sort of first take on, because there's plenty of things out there I haven't tried, and I'm happy to take some suggestions. Now, about those job opportunities for Elixir developers, I have a couple of sponsors that help me do what I do, and one is Westeret, which is an agency with strong values focused on long-term thinking that is hiring currently in the US. The other one is Bzt, which is a scrappy startup here in Sweden that's trying to transform the way cities do short distance and in-city transportation, and they're using electric vehicles, and they're hiring in Sweden. If that sounds interesting to you, go to underjord.io, click the jobs link in the menu, and you can read more about these companies and these opportunities there. Now, I've personally spoken to these companies. I've spoken to the leadership, I've spoken to developers that work there, and I believe they are good companies worthy of your time and your attention. So if you're looking for Elixir work, take a look. Now, if you want to know more about what I do, I would suggest signing up for my newsletter, which comes out every week. contains new original writing from me every week, and it also keeps you up to date with new videos, new podcasts, new blog posts, and other assorted shenanigans I get up to. So if you want to keep track of what I do, sign up there. Thanks for watching, and stay curious out there.